So the main agenda for today's session, we are going to discuss on the complete Agile Scrum framework, what exactly it is and how it is structured. So in here, we are going to discuss on what exactly is Scrum, the entire Scrum framework, what exactly is Sprint, and the Scrum ceremonies, and then we are going to conclude the session with our discussion on the entire certification training as well. So let's get started. Now, the first question, Scrum, and again, before Scrum, as we know, is one of the most popular agile frameworks in use today, and there are multiple reasons why they are most widely used because again it has been adopted by because it has a complete end-to-end understanding of the entire framework that allows us to make sure that we are going to have a clear-cut and most effective methods of any product development. And first of all, now in terms of agile, again, agile is completely a mindset, a philosophy, and it's more like a way of thinking, a movement focusing on communication, team thinking, and innovative talks, flows, value creation, and while we are developing any product, whether we are talking about the enterprise or about the commercial product in total. So at its core, Agile is a set of principles for actions that keep a software development team organized and efficient. And Agile started back in 2001 when a team of software developers got together in Utah for a weekend of fun and discussion. And they compiled their views and principles into a document that is easy to understand and apply, which we now refer as Agile Manifesto, which contains all the methodologies that needs to be applied when we are working for any software development. That exactly is what we have Agile known as. And Agile comes in multiple forms. So if we talk about Scrum here, now earlier we used to have multiple methodologies. Earlier we used to have multiple methodologies of software development. The most, we can say the most early version of the framework we use was waterfall model, where we have multiple sequential steps, including planning, building, testing, review, and deploy, where we have fixed timeline, and waterfall was really good for a small scale application deployment where we didn't have much scope of going for, we can say, more changes, and we had less scope of changes, and the entire number of, you can say, even the number of testing was not that much higher, because now we have to deploy the solution to large user base, and then we have to make sure that we are able to continuously make changes, deploy them, test them, and then deploy and again make them permanent. So again, for that large scale deployment and for those applications which has frequent changes, this waterfall model was not successful. And agile comes in multiple forms, meaning there are number of subsets to agile development as well, and Scrum itself is one of the subsets. So each one of them emphasizes, as we can say, almost they have a part of the agile development, but again, they have some differences when it comes down to the approach followed by them. And again, the entire differences are based on are mostly the incremental, iterative, and adaptable philosophy based. So if you talk about Scrum, then as per the definition, Scrum is a framework within which people can address complex adaptive problems while productively and creatively delivering products of highest possible value. That's the official definition that we have for Scrum. So in simple layman terms, we can say that Scrum is a lightweight agile framework that can be used for managing the entire iterative and incremental projects of different types. And the concept here is to break large complex projects into smaller stages where we can review it, we can adapt to it along the way while we are implementing it. Now, with the introduction of Scrum, so as you can see here, we have multiple phases. We have to continuously plan, build, test, and review each and every component of the entire application. And Scrum allows us to do that. And that is exactly the official definition that we had discussed. So Scrum promotes developing products with through processive techniques and practices with iterations and increments to deliver maximum value. So we can create one iteration, we can see if that iteration is working or not, and then we can keep on improvising it by building multiple iterations one after the other and just testing out to deliver the maximum value we can give to the client for a given project. And these different iterations, they are all called as Scrum. These different iterations available here, they are referred as Scrum itself, which is basically and at the end of each sprint we have to launch the potential deliverable software so that we can find out the best iterations possible. That's exactly what Scrum is. And Scrum follows the entire agile approach to tackle complex problems. And with Scrum, there are multiple advantages as well. So with Scrum, we can write fewer lines, we can create fewer plans and do more in short iteration time. In short iteration time or cycles that we can call as sprints, as we discussed. We can work as one dedicated and committed team instead of working on separate groups. And we can constantly deliver functioning products at the end of each sprint, where we can receive continuous feedback from our customers. And through that, we can continuously improvise our data as well as part of the entire development. And that's why Scrum, as we discussed, is basically a flexible way of working on any kind of projects in this rapidly changing world. So they are now, before we can start our discussion on Scrum, and Scrum was first of all introduced, as we know, back in 1986. And now there are multiple people and parts of a Scrum framework. First of all, we have Scrum roles, then we have events in Scrums, and then we have Scrum artifacts. So basically, in terms of Scrum roles, we have three roles. We have product owner, Scrum Master, and then we have team. So when we talk about product owner, so this person is basically responsible for the work the team is supposed to complete. And the main role of a product owner is to motivate the team to achieve the goals and the vision of the project. So again, the entire planning, the entire vision of the project is going to be handled by product owner. And while a project owner can take input from others, but when it comes to making major decisions, ultimately he or she is going to be responsible. And then it comes down to Scrum Master. So Scrum Master ensures that all the team members follow the Scrum theories, rules, and practices. They make sure that the Scrum team has whatever it needs to complete its work, like removing roadblocks that are holding up progress, organizing meetings, dealing with challenges, and solving the bottleneck issues. That's the role of a Scrum Master. Whereas in terms of team, the development team, which is called as a Scrum team, it is basically a self-organizing and a cross-functional team where it all works together to deliver the products. And Scrum development teams are given the freedom to organize themselves and manage their own work to maximize the team's effectiveness and efficiency. All right. So these all are the roles that we have in Scrum. So suppose there are a number of people in a room and they have to queue up. They have to queue up according to their respective heights. So taking the minimum amount of time possible. So again, if they have this kind of problem, again, there can be multiple approaches that we can use for solving this problem. The first approach would be the supervisor approach, where a supervisor is going to guide them, okay, how they have to be listed, how they have to be placed one by one. And again, the entire training concept, the entire division is going to be done by the supervisor itself as a part of supervisor approach. Then the agile approach would be, now if we have multiple teams here, now in terms of the agile, again, the agile team is going to simply specify the entire parameters and they all are going to be arranged accordingly, and that in a much faster manner instead of doing things one by one. So supervisor is going to make sure that the entire supervisor is going to guide each and every entity one by one. Then only they are going to be shortlisted for one by one. Whereas in Agile, the entire framework has been designed, and that framework, since it is going to be followed by all, so they are going to self-align them as per the framework defined as a part of the entire Agile approach. And again, if someone doesn't fit into the entire profile, they can simply they can simply readjust themselves accordingly as per the entire agile approach. So you can say agile is basically a set of practices that promotes continuous iteration of development and testing throughout the entire software development life cycle of the project. It promotes self-organization and assists teams in responding to the unpredictability of the entire problem in hand. That exactly is what Agile is. And then who is a Scrum Master? So Scrum Master allows the team to self-organize and make changes quickly. He or she facilitates the agile principles, and the Scrum Master manages the process for how information is going to be exchanged as a main principle followed by Scrum Masters. Now, Scrum Master, if you talk about Scrum Master's anti-patterns, then Scrum Master is not a supervisor. Scrum Master is not a secretary. So the and self-organization does not mean the absence of management. All right. So let's proceed further. So now let's discuss on the entire concept for Scrum framework. So now in terms of Scrum framework, now what exactly is a Scrum framework? So basically it involves the working of each and every component together. So and that exactly is what we have defined as Scrum framework. So now this current image shows roughly the outline how a sprint in Scrum framework works. So basically we have multiple owners. So, if you talk about the entire first process, then any Scrum process starts with the product owner. Any particular we can say the entire process here starts with the product owner. So basically the product owner creates a product backlog. So basically in here we are seeing the entire owner, right? So the owner is going to be responsible for creating the backlog of the entire project, and which is basically a list of tasks and requirements for the final product needs to have. And the important part here is that the product backlog must be prioritized. And then it go on, and that's the main part of creating the entire product owner. So they are responsible for creating this kind of backlog. Then it comes down to sprint planning meeting. So the entire Scrum team has to get together for a sprint planning, which is then the team decides together what to work on first from the product backlog. So we have suppose there are multiple backlogs, there are multiple requirements that needs to be completed. So how to prioritize them, which one to work together, which one to start with, that has to be defined by the entire team. And this subset of items from the product backlog becomes a sprint backlog. So basically, if we have sprint backlog, suppose we have one item, right? So again, we can simply define them. We can break it down to sprint as per the priority level defined. And then during the sprint, the team needs to communicate progress and issues. And this meeting is called as a daily scrum. This is called as a daily scrum. So basically what has been done and how the development and the entire project looks like, the entire progress and all the issues faced, they all have to be communicated well in this daily scrum. And it is overseen by the Scrum Master, because again, Scrum Master ensures that all these Scrum methodologies are going to be applied or not. And at the end of the entire sprint here, we have the sprint review. At the end, we also have a sprint review, and which is also organized by the product owner. The sprint review is also organized by the owner. And during the meeting, the development teams demonstrates on what they have completed since the last sprint. And then the product owner gives information about what is remaining on the product backlog and estimated time to complete the project if needed. That is done towards the end of the entire sprint here. So after the sprint review, the Scrum team gathers up in we can say a retrospective meeting. We have a complete retrospective meeting where the team discuss what went well, what did not went well, and what were the scope of improvement and what could be done better. So this is the main objective of this sprint retrospective. What has been achieved in the, we can say, most efficient manner, what couldn't be achieved, and why they didn't achieve it, and what could have been done in a much better way to improvise the entire sprint. And now it might be a tech limitation which is holding them back, or it can be a team member who is overlooked with tasks, or it can be someone who is overloaded with the task as well. And then the team decides how to fix these problems and then creates a plan for improvements to be implied in the next sprint. And the entire cycle here repeats for all the remaining tasks in the backlog. And this goes on until either the deadline has been reached. Suppose we had a deadline of 6 months. So either the entire deadline would have been achieved, or the entire budget is exhausted. For example, the entire budget was for suppose for $100,000. So suppose if we have exhausted the entire budget, then only this entire sprint should be stopped, or the entire timeline has been, or the entire deadline has been reached, or the entire product has been developed with the final, with we can say with the utmost satisfaction. These are the only three conditions where this entire sprint is going to be stopped. So we can say in a nutshell that Scrum framework is to produce a working piece of the product after every sprint. After every sprint, we should be getting a fixed product. And to again, that's why it is also defined as a complete flexible way of working in a rapidly changing environment. That's how the entire sprint framework is created. Now basically we have the entire Scrum implements the entire scientific methods of empiricism. So basically it replaces a programmed algorithmic approach with a heuristic one, and with respect for people and self-organization to deal with unpredictability and solving complex problems. That is what is done by Scrum framework. Now, there are three pillars of empiricism that we are going to follow here. So by the term empiricism, we simply mean working in a fact-based, experience-based, and evidence-based manner. And Scrum implements an empirical process where the progress is based on observations of reality, not fictions, man, not on any hypothesis. That's the main basis of using empiricism. And the entire Scrum also places great emphasis on mindset and cultural shift to achieve business and organizational agility. That's the main use of using of these three pillars of empiricism here. So like we have transparency, then we have inspection, and then we have adaptation. So let's discuss on these entire components one by one in detail so that we can have a clear-cut understanding of how these things are implemented in the real-world scenario. So first of all, we have transparency. So transparency simply means presenting the facts as it is, and all the people involved, the customer, the CEO, the individual contributors, they all are transparent in the day-to-day dealing with the others. That exactly is what we mean by transparency here. So basically, in terms of transparency, again, suppose the entire finding, the entire framework has to be shared by other team members. What exactly has been the status? What exactly has been the entire budget, the timeline, and the work done, and in terms of the quality is also defined. So again, these things have to be defined as a part of the entire transparency planning here. All right. Then the entire adaptation is simply focused on the context, that about the continuous improvement, the ability to adapt based on the results of the inspection as well as a part of adaptation in Scrum framework. So in terms of the entire Scrum lifecycle, it is divided into product backlog, release backlog, sprint backlog, backlog items in terms of demo of the potential release, and then we are going to work on the entire retrospective in terms of the entire life cycle followed by Scrum. And these things are being done in a sprint, like we discussed in a sprint life cycle, where we need to have a daily Scrum meeting as well, where we need to have a daily, and you can say a detailed Scrum meeting. So basically, daily Scrum meeting should be of 15 minutes, not more than that, where we can discuss or that and where we can ensure that all the team members they are on the same page, and then we can strategize for next 24 hours. So the entire daily Scrum meeting should be based on discussing three main core questions. That is, what was done yesterday by Scrum team. So again, there had been 3 points of discussion. What was done yesterday by the Scrum team, and that helped to meet the sprint goal. What will be done today that is going to help to meet the entire goal, and are there any impediments that are preventing the team from meeting the sprint goal? That is going to be the main point of discussion. And then towards the end, we are going to have this entire sprint review as well that we are going to discuss step by step. And then we have to have multiple components here. We should be including the entire the Scrum team as well, the entire product owner, the user stories, and the Scrum Master. They all have to be a part of the entire team altogether in terms of the entire retrospective that we had to follow in Scrum. Now, in terms of sprint, as we discussed, sprint is basically an iteration for any of the core components that we have discussed. Sprint is what? Sprint is basically a simple iteration of the entire concept that we have focused on. So sprint ensures that all the process, again, they are consistent and they should be having the consistent duration throughout the entire development efforts. Throughout the entire development efforts, that has to be consistent. And the sprints are limited to 1 calendar month. There should not be a single sprint which lasts more than a month as part of the entire sprint life cycle that we can define. Then the factors that affect the duration of the sprint include stability of the backlog. That is also important. Then the another factor which simply affects the entire stability of any Scrum framework, or you can say any sprint, is the overhead cost. Because okay, suppose if we are shooting past our budget, then again we have to take care that these things does not happens, because again then we'll be facing a challenge in terms of the entire implementation part. Correct? So that's why the Scrum Master coaches and mentors a team for shorter sprints so that we can break the entire problem statement into shorter time, and then we can simply have it delivered as a part of shorter sprint that we can focus on getting individual objects from individual sprints from the entire backlog created. So there are some other terminologies as well that is included here, like we have sprint goal and then we have sprint cancellation. So once the sprint duration is defined and user stories are selected, neither can be altered, because again, the entire goal cannot be changed for that sprint, and the sprint cannot be cancelled once it has been started, because again, it will be complete waste of the entire resource as well. That has to be taken care of. And then we have Scrum artifacts. So Scrum artifacts are basically the product backlogs. And then we have the sprint backlog, and then we have the increment. So these all are a component of Scrum artifacts. Basically, we can say artifacts are just physical records that provide the project details while developing a product. So for any product, we have to have the artifacts. So Scrum artifacts include 3 main core components. We have product backlog, sprint backlog, and then we have increment. So product backlog, it's a simple document that outlines the list of all the tasks and every requirement that the final product needs. And it is constantly evolving and it is never complete. So the entire product owner manages the entire backlog, which also includes how it is made available to the entire Scrum team, its entire content, and how it's ordered everything. So the entire product owner and the rest of the Scrum team works together to review the backlog and make all the adjustment as and when required. And that's why for each term, or we can say for each item in the product backlog, we should add some additional information, like we can add description, order based on priority, and the estimation, the value to the business as well. And then we have sprint backlog. So it is basically a list of all the items from the product backlog that needs to be worked on during a sprint. And the team members sign up for tasks based on the skills and priorities. So in real time, so basically it provides a real-time picture of the work that the entire team is going to work on, and they are going to get it completed. So basically there are some important points about sprint backlog, like we have it is now the entire sprint backlog should be dynamic, because it should be, and basically it is, since it is an outcome of the sprint planning meeting session, it should be taken care of. The entire development team owns the sprint backlog, so the entire owner is going to be the entire development team, and the divided tasks according to the skills. It's a highly visible real-time picture of the work that the development team plans to complete. And then at last we have increment. So now the last but not the least, so increment is the most important artifact, and basically it's a sum of the work that has been completed during a sprint combined with all the work completed during the previous sprints as well. Now the most important pointer about increment is it must be in the usable condition regardless of whether the product owner decides to release it or not. That means now here we get, now basically this is going to cover all the items that we might come across when we are working with the entire Scrum framework. But how exactly does a Scrum actually works? So that is how exactly we have discussed in the first session itself, right? So we had discussed on these pointers already. So like we have the product backlog, then we have the sprint backlog, like we have user features are, again, these all are component of the sprint backlog as well, as we discussed already. And there are four ceremonies available in Scrum. We have sprint planning, daily Scrum, sprint review, and then we have sprint retrospect. So as we discussed, first of all, it starts with sprint planning. So basically, it's a meeting where the work to be done during a sprint has to be mapped out, and the team members, and during this meeting, the entire team clearly defines the deliverables for the sprint and assigns the work which is required to, or which is necessary to be completed to achieve the given goal. And the entire development team decides on the functionality to be worked on upon the, we can say, when we are having this kind of meeting and the planning stage, where the entire product owner modifies the product backlog accordingly and discusses the entire project target that a sprint should achieve. And the entire Scrum team makes sure that they have to take a part in the entire sprint planning, and the entire Scrum team takes part in sprint planning to understand and the work that it and all the other tasks that has to be performed in that sprint and create a sprint goal. So how to achieve that work? So basically, the entire team agrees on the product backlog terms and sets a sprint goal. And it is also done by designing the entire system and work that needs to be converted before we can convert the product backlog into a working product increment. That exactly is, and again, the entire sprint planning answers three main questions: what can be delivered, and it also answers how the work can be, how can the work needed to be delivered can be achieved, and when the work is considered done. And usually time box at 2 hours a week, not more than that, which can be 30 minutes on a daily basis. And then we have daily Scrum. Daily Scrum, as we discussed, the time box should be 15 minutes, where the entire team will get a chance to get on the same page and put together a strategy for the next 24 hours. And the main point of discussion is, what did the team do yesterday that helped to meet the goal? What the team is doing today, is going to do today, that is going to help towards achieving the goal? And the are there any impediments, are there any dependencies that needs to be taken care of? Then we have sprint review. So in sprint review, now during the sprint review, the owner explains what the planned work was and what was not completed during the sprint. The team then presents the completed work and discuss what went well and how the problems were solved. And here, basically, it should be boxed at 1 hour per week. And the sprint review should include the owner where they explain when the backlog items have been done and what has been not, as we discussed. The development teams demonstrate the work that has been done. And basically, the team does research on the marketplaces as well and estimate the budget, potential capabilities, timelines, and marketplaces for all the upcoming release as well as a part of the entire group contribution. And then towards the end, we have the retrospective. So basically, during sprint retrospective, the entire team discusses what went right, what went wrong, and how to improve. They decide on how to fix the problem and create a plan for improvements to be enacted during the next sprint. And regardless of how good a Scrum team is, there is always room for improvement. And a good Scrum team will always focus on continuous improvement opportunities, which is usually discussed in the sprint retrospective meeting, as we discussed on all of these components before as well. So as a conclusion, we can say the entire Scrum framework is really important. We have covered what exactly a Scrum is, why don't we use the waterfall model, how different what exactly is Agile and the complete Scrum framework, how it is deployed, who exactly is a Scrum Master. And then we covered, now in Scrum framework, we covered what exactly is Scrum framework, do we mean by empiricism, what is the life cycle of Scrum, and then in terms of the entire sprint, we had discussed what exactly is sprint, what factors affect the sprint, what are sprint artifacts, and then we have covered on Scrum ceremonies, where we have discussed on sprint planning, on daily Scrum, on sprint review, and what exactly is sprint retrospective. So thank you so much for joining, guys, and have a great day ahead. Take care. Bye-bye.